Well, hello. Welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. So, this week's blog is entitled The Cadets. Over the course of the last week, we have had the unique pleasure of once again having our Third Amendment rights being violated at the Lieberman home. As most of you know, Cheney, our youngest daughter, has been at home from West Point for winter break. And over the course of the last week, 5 other cadets ended up joining us. These kids came from Pennsylvania, New York, South Carolina, and it's been an absolutely wonderful experience. The whole thing really culminated for us last Friday night when 2 of our clients, Elena Flyer and her husband David Flyer, invited us all over to their house for dinner. Now, there's a unique reason for this. David himself is a 1974 graduate from West Point. He's now an attorney. He's got a firm specializing in intellectual property law. But it was a great opportunity for the cadets to, sit down with an old grad and kind of exchange war stories and stuff like that. What really struck me, though, I deal with Cheney on a fairly regular basis, obviously, whether she's at home or whether we're, FaceTiming with her back at West Point. And each time I have an opportunity to, see one of the cadets, candidly, usually through a video interface, I'm always impressed with their bearing and their gravitas and just their ability to articulate, especially at their relatively young age. But this was the first time that we had a bunch of these kids out of uniform kind of hanging out with us. And it struck me on a couple of different levels. One of the things that many of us have noticed over the course of really the last generation is the development of what we sometimes refer to as the beta male. These are, young men that don't necessarily exhibit the same level of testosterone or a desire, frankly, for independence that most of us did when we were that age. And it's troubling on a number of different levels. When, I started looking at some of these guys that were coming on in, they, just generally speaking, look like normal, everyday kids. I think the oldest one is 20 years old. But there is a presence about them. In fact, one of the things that struck me right off the bat, and I mentioned this in the blog, when the first cadet came in, when Cheney picked him up at the airport, a young kid from New York named Adam, he immediately addressed me as Mr. Lieberman. And I said, oh, no, call me Stephen. The second cadet that came in addressed me as Mr. Lieberman. And again, I said, no, just call me Stephen. This sort of repeated itself with each cadet that came in. And the same thing happened with Sandy. They constantly referred to her as Mrs. Lieberman. To date, none of them have ever referred to either of us by our first name. While we've given them permission to call us Sandy and Stephen, they still refer to us as Mr. and Mrs. Lieberman. It's and Sir and Ma'am is being used on a regular basis as well. And they do so without any level of self-consciousness. It's not a military thing. I think it's just the way they were brought up. And that politeness, the confidence that they exhibit, this is something that I think gives each of us pause that, we look at the future and we look at it typically with a high degree of trepidation. The state of the union right now is going through enormous turmoil. But when I look at these young people, I'm given hope. And I guess that's the ultimate message for this blog. Anyways, I hope you enjoy reading it. Again, thank you, David and Elena, for inviting us over to your house. And once again, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.